Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone is doing well today. My foot is hurting a bit, but other than that, I am alright as well. So, the manifesto book. And I've already put a poll up as well, by the way, which is asking you, how many strokes do you think I'm going to have in this one? So where we last left off, we were about to cover chapter 5.3 on page 280, Leftist Gloating. Now, that should lubricate the old throat and what have you. So, without further ado, let's get this started. In the year 2000, the leftist The Guardian newspaper published an article entitled UK Whites Will Be a Minority in 2100, pointing out that the demographer who made the calculation that the indigenous British would be an ethnic minority by 2100 wished to remain anonymous for fear of accusations of racism. Yeah, I wonder why. No doubt, this academic making demographic projections that have turned out to be massive underestimates feared losing his job because the likes of leftist propagandists like Davey and Ebner would use the smear of racist or far right, and the demographer would have had his career and personal reputation destroyed. Naturally, a couple of decades after The Guardian publicised these underestimates, the leftist newspaper now describes population replacement as a conspiracy theory. The real conspiracy is the pretense that Ink Sock's replacement of the population of Britain isn't at an advanced stage. When the oligarchy thought that the public wouldn't believe replacement could really happen, the oligarchy could publicly gloat that if it would be achieved within decades. Once significant numbers of the indigenous population realised that replacement was well underway, that a new electorate has been imported, the oligarchy began to mock them as conspiracy theorists. Let's try with a bit of light in here, make it a bit more comfortable. Anyway, having established that population replacement in Britain is a fact rather than a theory, let's demolish the propaganda from the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. Nowhere in their report do these experts actually quote from the book by Camus. They don't even give any page numbers for ideas that they are supposedly paraphrasing. Do you think that even a first-year student at university could produce a report on a controversial book without at least quoting from the book in question, without at least providing references to page numbers that substantiate their claims about the book? Heck, even school pupils are told they must back up their claims by quoting evidence. You all know that every valid point must be backed up with evidence. Most of the time, our evidence in English comes from the text we're studying. We quote it. The above is taken from guidance given to school pupils of what is expected of them, but this would be too much work for the paid propagandists of the Institute of Strategic Dialogue. The evidence would contradict their attempt to gaslight the public. Propagandists feel no need to prove substantive evidence when all they are doing is maintaining the grooves of gramophone minds. Contrast the behaviour of the ISD authors with our book, Muhammad's Quran. We included the entire Quran and annotated and cross-referenced individual verses so that no one could even allege we were taking parts of it out of context. Yet the ISD's objective experts, controlled by international financiers and members of the Houses of Lords, which are about as worthy of their titles as I am of the title Mr. Fitness, but I digress, feel no need to follow the scholarly standards expected even of school children. Davey and Ebner used nearly 100 footnotes, and they used dozens of charts and photographs in their glossy report, but they can't follow the most basic rules of evidence and proof. What these experts do instead is turn to a YouTube video as their evidence of what Camus argues in his book. It makes you wonder, what's the point in someone like Camus writing a 500-page book when the oligarchy will just pour money into bogus leftist organisations that think the height of evidential proof is a 20-minute YouTube video and not the 500-page book? If these experts were anything other than paid propagandists of the oligarchy, they would have analysed the evidence and the claims made by Camus in the book. I'm sorry, I've only woken up at like 10 o'clock in the morning, so I haven't had a lot of time to get myself up and running. Anyway, even in their own report, they list the social media accounts that have been banned. So the YouTube video, even if it was Camus reading out his entire book, could be banned any day. Either Davney and Ebner are lazy, or they simply can't read a serious book written in French. The ISD authors go on to say, and I quote, "Proponents of the Great Replacement theory often draw on conspiracy theories to amplify their messaging, suggesting that progressive politicians, the media, and globalists are working concertedly, actively, and purposely to destroy native Europeans and their cultures. They often paint Muslim communities as implicit in these plans because of the perception that they innately desire to destroy Western civilization." End quote. I am going to take a moment here to say I do not have a problem with all Muslims. I have a problem with the people who are studying and taking as gospel the very extreme parts of Islam, Sunni Islam to be precise. I don't think you will find one person here who will say that a peaceful Muslim doesn't deserve to be here. Like, if there is someone who practices Islam but not the extremist teachings, is basically here to integrate and work in our society, I think you will be very, very hard-pressed to find one person who says, we don't want them here. And the only people who might even say that are the people who are literal degenerate scumbags. Hell, as I've done many, many times in some of my videos I'm recording when I'm coming home from work. I have a Muslim driver who's driving a white van, coming along, waves to me, and his wife also says hello as well. Like, that, some of these people are really, really nice people. I don't have a problem with the people who are nice. I have a problem with the people who are going around committing all the grooming gang or rape gang crimes. I have a problem with the people who want to destroy our society. I have a problem with the people who don't want to integrate and are intolerant of our beliefs. Those are the people I have a problem with. Not anybody who wants to integrate peacefully. Moving on. Where was I? Anyway, here we are. The report's authors literally describe the project of which they are part of and then gaslight their readers with. If you point out what we're doing, then you're a conspiracy theorist. A prime example of gaslighting. The leftist authors of the ISD construct a fantasy boogeyman, Camus, to claim that population replacement is a conspiracy theory, when all is demonstrably happening at unbelievable speed. Moreover, who funds Davy and Ebner? A cabal of international financiers, media companies, and leftist members of the Houses of Lords. The exact groups of people the ISD authors say are identified in the conspiracy theory as being behind the project of population replacement. And as for Muslims seeking to destroy Western civilization, let's not forget that after every Islamic terrorist attack by the followers of Islam, people imported into the UK, against the wishes of the British public, the oligarchy, politicians, journalists, publishers, academics, clergy, etc., gaslight the public with Islam is the religion of peace. The truth about Islam is proven in great detail in Muhammad's Quran. But you can see from Appendix 12 that for more than 1,000 years, Muslims have been proud of Islam's violent destruction of other civilizations. The oligarchy do not want the public to see well-proven facts. This ISD report is pure propaganda, designed to disguise from the electorate that we, the demos, the common indigenous people, are being systematically replaced by, which is by the oligarchy, the rich, the powerful people who despise us. To them, we are animals to be farmed. The ISD authors go on to claim that the far right, the ones who point out that the oligarchy are involved in the multi-decade program to replace the populations of the West, focus on censorship of extreme right voices by the government and social media companies to suggest an Orwellian system is being created to permanently silence proponents of the Great Replacement theory. Remember, those who have warned about this population replacement, such as Reynolds, Camus and Pim Fortuyn, are not far right, but were people who for decades were socialist activists. As soon as leftists deviate from the leftist catechism, they are branded far right, exactly the way Stalin treated any dissenter. The oligarchy would respect Camus with a penis and a beard, saying, "I'm a woman," but he's not permitted to be a leftist who opposes the genocide of white people. As for Orwellian censorship, it was leftist publishers who prevented Orwell from stroke number one, publishing Animal Farm. And it was a leftist publisher made into a lord, an unelected lawmaker, who was instrumental in the creation and running of the ISD, who issued this report. The absolute epitome of Orwellian censorship in Orwell's 1984 is INGSOC, English Socialism, the members of the Houses of Lords who created the Institute of Strategic Discourse are English socialists. In 1984, INGSOC's archetypal enemy is Emmanuel Goldstein, or Stein, or however you want to pronounce it. Goldstein isn't allowed to speak for himself. Instead, the masses are herded into the daily 2-minute hate, where Goldstein and his ideas must be hated with unthinking religious fervour. In the ISD report, and in the liberal media in general, Reynolds Camus is subjected to the 2-minute hate. Paid leftists will write a 14,000-word report on Camus and his ideas without once quoting what he says in his 500-page book. And when Camus cannot be found in a single library in Britain, Camus might as well have entitled his book The Theory of and Practice of Oligarchical Collectivism, or Oligarchical Collectivism. The name of Goldstein's book in 1984, because INGSOC today gives truth-telling dissidents the same treatment that Big Brother gave to Goldstein in 1984. This comparison with 1984 and Goldstein isn't just a metaphor. It's a fact that the oligarchy, those with power, are censoring the people, warning about the fundamentally anti-democratic program of population replacement. It's not only Muhammad's Quran that is banned by Amazon, but also Peter McLaughlin's book Easy Meat, exposing the 5 decades in which the oligarchy permitted gangs of Muslim immigrants to treat English schoolgirls as sex slaves. And of course, Tommy Robinson has been given the Goldstein treatment for years, with the oligarchy telling the public that Tommy Robinson is the most hated man in Britain, yet so far he has had 3 #1 best-selling books, despite the political, legal and financial persecution by the oligarchy. And of course, even his autobiographical books are banned, but according to the leftists funded by the oligarchy via the Institute of Strategic Dialogue, there's no censorship going on. Well, we know that's pretty fucking obviously a lie. Wouldn't you think that such an organisation would actually interview Reynolds Camus to put their points to him? They pretend they are seeking dialogue, but in fact they are the Institute of Strategic Propaganda. The ISD gaslighting is meant to stop the public recognising or remembering this systematic censorship, something we are going to can't even get the words out. We see going on right in front of our eyes. In the 1980s, the head teacher of a school had his career destroyed for pointing out that many of the children in his school were held back by not speaking English at home. In the 1990s, the state sided with the Muslims, threatening to kill Salman Rushdie for writing the satanic verses, and his publisher never released it in paperback as an attempt to restrict people from reading it. In 2006, a university academic had his career ended because he published a book showing how political correctness, wokeness, was a policy straight from Lenin's communism. It's reported that a campaign was launched by the Trotskyist organisation Unite Against Fascism, which called upon the university to sack Ellis. Remember, Lord Cameron, who studied PPE at Oxford, was listed as a founding signatory of the UAF. In 2009, the UK government banned Geert Wilders from entering the UK to speak at the House of Lords. Far-right Dutch MP refused entry to UK, and Britain's self-styled Liberal Democrat Party supported the ban. By that time, Wilders had been a Member of Parliament in the Netherlands for 12 years, and in the 2023 elections his party received more votes than any other party. In 2020, the oligarchy had people banned from Twitter, YouTube, etc., for questioning anything about the supposed origins or supposed lethality of the COVID-19 virus. They also banned people who questioned the safety and effectiveness of the genetic engineering being marked as mRNA vaccine. I'm going to put my thoughts on this as well, because I have been targeted by YouTube on the back of the COVID-19 84 scamdemic. So what basically happened with that, for anybody that doesn't know, is I did end up covering a bit of COVID-19 84, and I tried to call it COVID-19 at first, but every single time I tried to cover it, I would end up having YouTube come after my ass, and they would say, "Your content has been taken down for medical misinformation." And then it turned out that all the information that I said, or at least I would say bare minimum 90% of it, was actually factually correct. So I would say, for example, that COVID-19 was no more than a glorified cold, a glorified flu. And they removed my videos for it. Yeah, it turns out, later down the line, when I got COVID, that was exactly what it was. It was basically something that made me feel a bit shitty, a bit like when you get a cold or a flu. You feel like shit, but after a week at most, maybe two pushing it, as long as you're not classed in the elderly or infirm category, you could survive it. They tried to put out the lie back in February, like 2021, 2022, something like that. They tried to put out the lie that 157,000 people had died as a direct result of COVID, when it turns out that only 17,371 people had died at that time as a direct result of COVID. They overinflated the figures by a factor of about 800%. Nearly 900, in fact. Let that sink in. Now, in 2023, Ofcom, a quango of the oligarchy, run by the great and the good, ruled that Mark Steyn was in breach of their rules. They claimed an episode of the Mark Steyn program presented a materially misleading interpretation of official data about the COVID vaccine, without sufficient challenge or counterweight. The rest of the media, also controlled by Ofcom, told the public thousands of times from 21 onwards that the mRNA vaccines were safe and effective without any challenge or counterweight whatsoever. And I have seen quite a few stories of people who have actually died as a result of taking the mRNA vaccine. Some people have had actual strokes from it. And I'm not talking the kind of strokes. I'm talking actual fucking strokes. People have had bleeds on the brain on the back of this shit. People have had heart attacks all of a sudden, and they just collapse to the floor. Just like that. All because of the vaccines. So don't tell me, or anyone else, that those vaccines were completely safe and effective. But of course the mainstream media won't tell you this. You know the drill, folks, because say it with me. It doesn't suit the narrative. Ofcom is the Ministry of Truth, far more Orwellian than even the BBC, as Ofcom decides what is misleading and what is true. Steyn left GB News saying that his employer was insisting he pays for any fines from Ofcom, which is not the norm in broadcasting. The ISD leftists purport that discussing such censorship is a conspiracy theory, yet in their own report they end up proving that the censorship exists. While steadily goldsteining the book by Camus, the very thing their report is supposedly about, the report's authors focus on the organisation named Generation Identity. In Table 3, the ISD leftists list the banned Facebook accounts of this group. Austrian group banned by Facebook. French group banned by Facebook. German group banned by Facebook. Italian group banned by Facebook. UK and Ireland group banned by Facebook. Thus, the very same document in which the oligarchy claims censorship is a conspiracy theory ends up proving that the oligarchy is censoring those opposed to population replacement while telling the public there's no censorship going on. And of course, the problem isn't just Facebook nor population replacement. The only censored issue, Twitter, YouTube, etc., are also techno-fascists. In 2024, AstraZeneca withdraws COVID vaccine worldwide after admitting it can cause rare blood clots. Yes, I bet you won't hear that in the mainstream media, will you? Yet, since January 2021, those who had been warning of the problems with the mRNA vaccine were being censored by the techno-fascists. The oligarchy does everything it can to control what the public can hear, see, say, and think. The oligarchy pretend to be interested in our economic and medical welfare, but it is just a pretense. They are only interested in furthering their own power and riches. Another of the Stalinist tactics of the left oligarchy is what Orwell in 1984 designates as unpersoning, a concept that's now passed into the English language with the wider meaning that in Orwell's novel, an individual who usually for political or ideological reasons is removed completely from recognition or consideration. In 1984, the person is usually dead and then removed from all historical records, as the left did in the Soviet Union. In the liberal democracy of the West, we can see how gay leftist professor Pim Fortuyn had his character assassinated, then was literally assassinated by a leftist, and Fortuyn is now forgotten. Meanwhile, the oligarchy ensures that the name and memory of the murdered black teenager Stephen Lawrence is kept alive. The leftist ISD unpersons Camus by writing a report about his concept without once even quoting from his book. They create a fictional Camus who is to be hated. If the oligarchy can provoke enough hatred towards someone like Camus that he is assassinated, the oligarchy will ensure that the name of Renaud Camus is not remembered. This is why organisations like the ISD are a secretive but organised cabal of leftists, international financiers and media moguls. The leftism is just a distraction from their efforts to retain and increase their power and riches. Besides, unpersoning another of the oligarchy's deceitful tactics is to smear by linking or associating them with someone who the oligarchy have already demarcated, never seen that word before, as an enemy of the state, as Goldstein is so marked in 1984. Thus, in smearing Renaud Camus, the leftist stroke number 2. The leftist ISD report says it is alleged that the Christchurch attacker directly referenced the defeat of Front National leader Marine Le Pen in the 2017 elections as a turning point that prompted him to commit the attack. While we should be cautious about taking the so-called manifesto at face value, we have seen similar rhetoric repeatedly in closed chat channels frequented by the extreme right, with adherents to the Great Replacement theory advocating for violent action when they've given up on political solutions. Thus, not only do they attempt to smear the writer, Camus, but also the principal political challenger to the oligarchy's replacement of the people of France. But notice the slimy sleights of hand used in this extract. Alleged, referenced, turning point, prompted. Attempts to tarnish people by imputation and innuendo, rather than any direct casual connection or even direct quotation. They go on to point out the killer's so-called manifesto, then instantly move on to talking about the supposed violent rhetoric in closed chat channels. Once again, their own work refutes their claims. If these leftist agents of the oligarchy are in these extreme right channels, how closed are these channels? Now there's something you need to think about. And if these leftist propagandists are in these channels, who is to say that those advocating violence in the channels are not also paid agents of the oligarchy? Evidence has come out in the past that the oligarchy pays agents to spend years undercover in extremist groups, while in recent decades the oligarchy have used gays as mascots. Go back before that, and the oligarchy were using young, handsome, uninformed police officers to entice men to show sexual interest, often destroying the life of the victim should he respond to the police solicitations. So anyone who thinks some closed channel is closed might witness the ISD authors chatting with some undercover agents provocateurs. But to the gramophone mind, this nonsense is evidence. What the solution for the oligarchy to the people waking up to anti-democratic program of population replacement, where the demos of democracy, the electorate are being deliberately replaced. More repression is their solution. I actually need to check that. That might be my UKIP stuff. Looks like they posted some more toilet roll. Now, let's move on. From a policy response perspective, the fact that extremist messaging and content often skirts the boundaries of both acceptability and legality represents a serious challenge. These groups often operate within a grey area that tests the limits of freedom of speech, illegal hate speech, and speech that contravenes the community stance of different social media platforms. The oligarchy know they are in full control of the print media, book publishing and newspapers, and radio and television. They are in full control of what passes for the institutions of democracy in Britain. Houses of Lords, Houses of Treachery, Commons, or maybe I was right first time, local government, etc., etc. They are virtually in full control of the courts, although they have to ensure that Tommy Robinson never faces a jury of his peers. And that's simply because we know full fucking well what would happen if a jury was sitting there in Tommy Robinson's cases. He would be declared not guilty, just like that. The oligarchy are in full control of the indoctrination that occurs in schools and universities. They are in full control of the corporations, the major Christian religious institutions, the civil service, the police, and the military. And I don't know why I hesitated there. The area the oligarchy are desperate to fully control, however, is the internet and social media. We can see with the military conflict in Ukraine how Russian news could be banned across the EU and the UK, with most of the public unaware this ban has occurred. This surreptitious ban ensures that only the oligarchy's version of what is going on in Ukraine and the West and Russia can be seen by the public in the UK and the EU. Russia, an entire nation, has been gold-steined. All their statements are controlled, mediated by Big Brother and INGSOC. We can see with the COVID scamdemic and the mRNA vaccine how the oligarchy shut down any dissent about the severity of the pandemic, or scamdemic as I keep calling it, or the origins of the virus, or the draconian lockdowns, or possible treatments. No one is allowed to question the mRNA vaccination, genetic manipulation to turn your body into a machine making dangerous spike proteins. Without the injection, the damaging spike proteins are only found in the bodies of people with severe cases of COVID. Those with a mild infection do not get the spike protein in their bloodstream. At the very least, the oligarchy benefited from the scamdemic in terms of increased power and increased riches from the virus and the vaccine. The popping of the money bubble was pushed off a few years into the future. The ISD named on the front page of this report is accompanied by a summary of their supposed mission: powering solutions to extremism and polarization. Yet their entire report is an extreme leftist perspective, and their organization is controlled by leftists. And leftists don't see their own extremism. It's only those who contest the leftist ideology who are seen as extremists. For all the oligarchy front organization ISD is supposedly concerned with, violent extremism, they have nothing to say about the millions of copies of the Quran being consulted daily in Britain, every copy of which says that the believers are to kill the unbelievers. This is violent extremism that the ISD doesn't want the public to talk about. The religious part of the replacement population has over 1,000 years of proven genocide and ethnic cleansing. See, for example, Fragosi's book Jihad in the West. Before Islam was invented, Arabia had pagans, Jews, Christians, but no Muslims. But after wiping out all diversity in Arabia, the armies of Islam flooded out from Arabia to conquer land from Lisbon to Kabul. Sorry. Oh dear. I'm dying. I've still got 30 years. I can't die yet. Yet the oligarchy have spent decades propagating the lie that this genocidal fanaticism is the religion of peace. All discussions of the ongoing replacement of the electorates in liberal democracies by the oligarchy and their paid shills is dismissed as conspiracy theory. You only need to look at a photograph of any street in London in the 1970s and now to see the transformation, or compare the TV adverts from the 1970s and now. The oligarchy want you to disbelieve what your own eyes show you. As in 1984, the oligarchy forced people to state that 2 + 2 = 5. At the same time, the oligarchy tell you population replacement isn't happening. The TV adverts and YouTube shown to people in the UK will almost always feature multiple non-white people. Sometimes the advert will feature no white people at all. This trend began after the British public voted to leave the EU in 2015. In early 2024, not one of the UK Prime Ministers, the First Minister in Scotland, the Mayor of London, the Irish Prime Minister, and then First Minister of Wales were Indigenous people of the British Isles. The oligarchy parade these contradictions in front of the public without the sound of any dissent from the public, proving to the oligarchy that they are in control of the public discussion. The gaslighting is total. You see endless immigrant faces paraded before you and in positions of power, but if you say population replacement is underway, you are a conspiracy theorist. Gaslighting. Since the faces on the streets and the positions of power and in thousands of adverts every day demonstrate that population replacement has been underway for decades, is there any need to even look at the demographic data in Appendix 1? But the apologists for this anti-democratic replacement will say the replacement isn't planned, it's just accidental. What no one talks about is that 25 years ago, the United Nations literally put forward a plan of population replacement entitled Replacement Migration. It is a solution to declining and aging populations, see Appendix 2. Thus, at the very highest levels of the oligarchy, globalist institutions, they are able to explicitly state what they're doing, safe in the knowledge that virtually no politician, journalist, or academic or leftist is going to say that replacing a population in this way is organised genocide implemented over decades. By the time the UN plan for population replacement was published, demographers were afraid to even put their names to statements about what was coming, fearing they would be smeared as racist and their reputation, salary and pension destroyed. Any politician who would speak out about it would be destroyed like Enoch Powell or assassinated like Pim Fortuyn. Thus, the leftist oligarchy get to conduct their slow-motion revolution exactly as the Fabian socialists wanted. Ironically, there was one very famous leftist who saw very clearly what was going on with mass immigration into Britain. According to him, what those with power in Britain are doing in dividing the working class by using immigrants to deliberately lower the wages of the indigenous people, so that the working class are poorer and they will have an enemy to attack rather than attack the people with power who are doing this. This antagonism is artificially kept alive and intensified by the press and by all the means at the disposal of the ruling classes. This antagonism is the secret of the impotence of the English working class, despite its organisation. It is the secret by which the capitalist class maintains its power, and the latter is quite aware of this. Who is this insightful leftist? Karl Marx? Yeah, Karl Marx. Writing in 1870 about Irish immigration into Britain. Of course, the oligarchy knew when what they were doing, and they know now. Immigration keeps wage inflation down, as does the exportation of manufacturing to poorer countries, globalism. But despite those things reducing inflation, they also pauperize the poorer parts of society, but in the world of Keynes Fabian economics, inflation still increases because the oligarchy keep increasing the size of the money supply, thus causing each unit of currency to have less value. We now move on to the final part of Chapter 5, which is Chapter 5.4. Replacement is an official policy. There are some rare instances of academics discussing the UN plan for population replacement. In 2001, in the journal Population and Environment, it was reported the imminent decline of populations in Europe, Japan, and South Korea has generated fears that there will not be enough working-age people to support the elderly. I'm sorry, there's something tickling my throat, something awful. The UN Population Division has seemed to endorse these fears by writing of the need for a solution to population decline. On the other hand, smaller populations would be environmentally advantageous in those countries. They must return to replacement level fertility or risk replacement by other populations. This excerpt uses the phrase and concept of population replacement a full decade before Reynold Camus was Goldstein for discussing the problem at length. Moreover, we can see that the supposed eco-fascism of the mass murderers in New Zealand, Texas, and New York State could have a basis in the environmentalist movement. Environmentalists and animal rights activists are far more likely to kill than us homosexual authors like Reynold Camus. After all, gay politician and author Pim Fortuyn was the victim of such an environmental activist rather than vice versa. But the leftist oligarchy supposedly want, on the one hand, to save the planet, while also helping the populations of Africa and Asia to double in size every generation, and then shipping millions of those people to the West. Save the planet, but encourage unlimited population growth. You might just think that the above quotation from Population and Environment is just from some obscure journal. However, the Royal Society in Britain is a very famous and highly prestigious organisation. In 2002, an article by Demographer, Dr. Coleman, on the UN plans appeared in their journal. English is hard, I know, shush. Although immigration can only prevent population decline, it's already well known that it can only prevent population aging at unprecedented, unsustainable, and increasing levels of inflow, which would generate rapid population growth and eventually displace the original population from its majority position. Net immigration to the United Kingdom is already in 2001, running at record levels, and is now the main engine behind UK population and household growth. By itself, the population stabilisation or even mild reduction is probably to be welcomed in the United Kingdoms, although the issue has attracted little attention since the 1970s. Dr. Coleman uses the concept of population displacement, yet there's been no demonization of him. We see again that 25 years ago, the environmental problems of ever-growing populations were raised by academics. Again, we can see why eco-fascism might drive some people to extremes. The lunacy of save the planet but fuel a population explosion makes no sense. If the welfare state and the pension system cannot survive stroke number 3 without replacing the population, then that is proof that the welfare state was an unsustainable Ponzi scheme. Something that was promised to the electorate by democratic elitists, yet the insurance money the workforce was compelled to pay was spent by the oligarchy to suit their goals. These immigrants will also make the same use of the welfare state and the pension system, so they too will need to be supported by an even larger number of immigrants. Go to any hospital in an area with lots of immigrants, and you will find lots of immigrants looking for medical treatment. In 2008, the Houses of Lords conducted an inquiry into the economic benefits of immigration and concluded, "We have found no evidence for the argument made by government, businesses, and many others that net immigration minus emigration, generates significant economic benefits for the existing UK population." Yet despite such reports, the oligarchy refused to allow any debate and just increased the amount of immigration. In 2013, it was concluded that migrants to the UK from outside Europe leave $100 billion hole in the public purse. The amount taken in benefits and services is 14% higher than money put back. Similar studies in other countries have exposed the lie that immigration benefits the country. A 2023 study in the Netherlands calculated that between 1995 and 2019, more than €1 billion went to migration-related issues every month in the Netherlands. Studies in Denmark, Germany and Austria conclude that throughout their lives, 45 to 60% of immigrants are going to be dependent on welfare benefits. There is nothing to justify any immigration. But under the recent Socialist Party government in the UK, the rates of immigration are running at over 1 million people per year. You can read the books on Britain's history published just before Blair's Fabian New Labour took office to find these books describing immigration of 50 to 130,000 a year of the 1950s and 1960s as substantial. But we now have rates 10 to 20 times higher than substantial. The oligarchy get to keep the wages low, keep the money earned from owning property high, and they get to ensure that the UK will be a divided, tribal country. When the money bubble implodes, the welfare state will implode, and society will explode. Is it any wonder the oligarchy are starting World War III? At the relatively low 2001 level of 185,000 net immigrants a year, Dr. Coleman was pointing out that these were record high numbers. The actual number of immigrants that year was closer to 480,000, and of course the illegal immigrants are not even counted in this number. The speed of population replacement is now 11 times higher, but the oligarchy just funds experts, such as those at ISD, to say the population replacement is a far-right conspiracy theory. In 2013, the professional demographer Dr. Coleman predicted that the indigenous people of Britain would be an ethnic minority, replaced by 2066. When Dr. Coleman made that prediction in 2013, immigration had been running at a rate of more than 500,000 to 600,000 per year from 2000 to 2012. After his prediction, the rate of immigration shot up to about 700,000 in 2014, and stayed at that level until 2021. In 2021, the Socialist Party, who have for decades pretended they would reduce immigration, doubled the number of immigrants from 600,000 to 1.2 million, and that's the level it stayed at. When the level of immigration is twice as high as the basis on which Dr. Coleman was working, you must understand that the year when the indigenous people became a despised, persecuted ethnic minority is far closer than the year 2066. In the case of England, it'll be before 2041. In the case of the UK, it was under Fabian, I'm not calling him sir, Tony the War Criminal Blair, that mass immigration began. The Fabian Society website boasts that when Socialist Tony came to power in 1997, that of the 650 MPs, 200 Fabians sat in the Houses of the Houses of Commons. Labour became the government on the votes of less than 31% of voters. See Appendix 8. You see a trend here with Keir the Traitor Starmer as well. Anyway, the Fabians were probably the single largest pressure group in Parliament, and with 200 Fabians, the population replacement began in earnest. Labour's relaxation of border controls was a conscious plan to encourage mass immigration. Ministers were nervous and reluctant to discuss such a move publicly for fear that it would alienate its core working class vote. Labour's conscious plan to change Britain was in force from the year 2000, and since that time the country has experienced unprecedented levels of immigration. And that will be all for today's book. We'll be continuing off on page 291. So, there'll be people who will have voted, and by the time this video gets up, you will have your answer. I love how the first vote was immediately 9 strokes, but no, I did not have 9 strokes. I only had a third of those. I only had 3 strokes with this session. Fucking hell, nearly made it 4. But I only had 3 strokes in this, 45-minute session, so I can't be doing that bad. That makes it about a stroke every 15 minutes, and I was doing it about once every 10 minutes, quite frankly. But that is another session concluded, and yeah, wish you all a good morning, afternoon, or evening, wherever you are in the world. Thank you one last time for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye-bye for now.